In this video, we are going to build this minimal but absolutely stunning portfolio website using Next.js and Tailwind. Right here on the main page, we have got this cool looking 3D animation video playing in the background, and thanks to the glass morphism effect on the card, you can actually see through, which looks super cool. We have also got some basic info and social media links, and we can use this menu over here to navigate to other pages. Creating this routing will be super simple using the app router. This is the About page for giving some information about yourself, your education, and job experience. Then there is the Work section to showcase your projects, the Skills page for your tech stack, and finally the Contact page for your details. Also, the entire website is fully responsive, so everything looks great on mobile as well. To make things easier for you, there is a starter code in the description that has all the images and packages that we are going to use for this project, so you don't have to waste time setting everything up from scratch. Just download the project and you can start the code along with me. It's going to be super easy to follow, and I will walk you through every single line of code. So let's get into it. Before we start the project, let's take a look at the starter code. As I mentioned at the beginning, all the images and packages are already inside. For example, for the icons, we are going to be using React icons, and for the buttons, we're going to use chatcn, which is already installed. You can see inside the components UI folder, this is a chatcn button. You can see the variants, the default, destructive, outline, secondary, ghost, and link. We are only going to be using a button, so that is it with chatcn. Then we have the images inside the public folder. These are the project images. And this is the video that we are going to use for the background. Inside the app folder, we have a data folder, which basically has some information about the projects. Of course, you can customize this and write down your own project's information. For every single project, we have a title, description, image, and the tech stack. Inside the other JSON file, we have information for the skills page. Again, you can customize this with your own skills. Inside the layout file, I have changed the title, the description. We are using the font Inter. And finally, inside the page.tsx, we just have this text. So this is how the starter code looks like. Now that we know what we are going to use, we can start the code. So let's start by adding the background video, which is going to be pretty simple. Let's close this page and go into the layout. So right here inside the body, this children element basically represents every other element that we are going to create inside this project, inside this website. And we're going to put the background video right on top of it. And the reason why we do it is because we are going to have routing inside the website. And as we go through pages, we don't want this video to be stop and play again. So in this way, the video is going to be persistent in the background no matter which page you are in. You're basically going to be seeing the same video playing in the background. Let's create a div. It is going to be fixed. And we're going to set the inset to 0, which basically sets top, bottom, left and right to 0 with 100% and height 100%. Let's bring it up just a little bit using zIndex10. Inside this div, we're going to have the video. Let's use the video tag. We're going to be using some attributes such as autoplay, which is basically going to make the video play automatically. We want this video to keep playing even if it's finished. It's actually a very short video. I think it's like 60 seconds long. So we don't want it to stop when it's finished. We can use loop for that. It is going to be muted. Let's set the width to 100% and height to 100%. Let's center this video using object cover and object center. Inside, using the source element, let's link the video, bgwidth.mp4. We also need to use the type attribute, which will be set to video mp4. So we can see the video in the background now. There is one more thing left, which is to create a little overlay on top of it. Let's create a div and position it absolute, inset 0. And we are just going to apply a little glass effect using backdrop blur medium. And oops, this is going to be outside the video element, but inside this div. So let's paste it over here. And there you go. And that is it. We have set the background. Now we can start to create the content. So back inside our project, before we start to create the main page inside our page.tsx file, let's create the other routes inside the app folder. As I mentioned at the beginning, creating this routing will be very simple because we are going to be using the app router. Let me show you how to create a route. You're going to have a total of 4 routes and we are going to be creating folders for them. So let's create a about folder, contact, skills, and work. So inside each of these folders, we're going to create a page.tsx file. And inside that page.tsx file, we are going to create functional components using arrayfce, which is a shortcut from a extension named React Snippets. We're going to do the same for the other routes. Let's create a page.tsx, use arrayfce, page.tsx, and the final one. Now we have the routes ready. I'm going to leave it like this now. So inside the page.tsx file, we're going to create the main page, and inside the main page, we're going to have a menu that lets us navigate to these pages, which I will explain how it will work in a second. Inside the page.tsx, first let's import everything that we are going to need. For the navigation links, we're going to need the link component from Next. Then we're going to need the button from chatcn, and we're going to need some icons from React icons. And here is all the icons that we are going to use. This is a building icon, which we will use for the location part. This is a chevron right, the GitHub logo, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and a down arrow icon. So let's start to create the design. Delete this text. We already have this div set to minimum age screen, which covers the entire page. It's a flex box, and it has item center and justify center, which will center the items that are going to be inside this div. So if I create this main element, it is going to be centered in the middle. Let's set the width to 100% and maximum width to X large, margin 3. And for the screens that are bigger than medium breakpoint, margin is going to be 8. Let's make sure this element stays on top of the background video, which, if you remember, we set it to z index 10. We're going to set this one to z index 50, space y8, which will basically create some space between the elements vertically. Let's create a border and make it gray 700 with 50% opacity. Let's give it some rounded corners and padding 5. After the small breakpoint, padding is going to be 10, and we're going to create a glass morphism effect using the blur X large. And let's make the background black 80%. So inside this main div, we're going to have 3 elements, 2 divs for informations and a navigation section, which will have the menu inside. Let's create a div and make it a flex container. After this small breakpoint, flex direction is going to be flex row, and we're going to put all the available space inside this div between the elements. We're going to center the items and set the flex direction to column reverse. And we're going to set the items to start. We're going to put some gap between them. And after this small breakpoint, gap is going to be 10. Let's have another div and set it to a flex container and use gap 3 to put space between this building icon and this h3. Gonna make this icon just a little bit bigger and text gray 400. Right under this div, we're gonna use a button, and as I showed you earlier, this button comes from chatcn and it has variants such as ghost. On hover, we're gonna make the background black 50%. The hover effect duration is going to be 300. on hover, text is going to be white, and we're going to have full rounded corners. Inside, we're going to have another div, and this div is going to create a pink animation, which I will show you what it means in a second. Right under it, going to have this little text over here that says available for work. You're going to use this div to create this little green pink animation. Let's set its position to relative, make it a flex container, make the text smaller, put some gap between them, center them horizontally and vertically, height and width 3, and rounded full, which will make it circular. Inside, we're going to have two spans. This one is just going to be a green circle, and on top of it, you're going to create the same one, but it will be animated using animate pink. It will be positioned absolute. It is going to be an inline flex element, height full and width full. It is going to be a circle again, and we're going to set the background to 500 green. And as you can see in the background, we have this little green dot that pinks, and it looks really cool. So right now we have this building icon and this text on the left and this pink and text on the right. The reason why we have flex row and flex call reverses, because for the mobile screens, as you can see, they are going to be on top of each other like this. So this was the first div. Let's create the second one, which will just have some information inside with a h1, a h3, and a paragraph. Inside the h1, you can write down your own name. Let's make it a lot bigger. Right under it, you can write down your job title. This one is going to have a gradient text effect. Let's set the font to bold and margin top 2. To create the gradient effect, we're going to clip the text to the background using background clip text. We need to make it transparent so we can see the gradient background through. Let's use the background gradient to right from emerald 400 via sky 300 to blue 500. For the paragraph, we're going to use text pretty. This is something to do with the responsiveness again. Once the viewport gets smaller, the words are basically going to be wrapped better. Going to use tracking tight. This is going to make the letters closer to each other. Margin top 3. And we're going to set the text color to neutral 300. Inside the paragraph, you can write down your information. I will copy and paste this text. And inside curly braces, we're going to have this little space over here because we're going to use a link right after this text. And this text is going to navigate the user to the contact page. And inside it, I'm going to say contact me and put some more space after the text. Let's style this link. We can actually copy and paste this gradient over here. Make the font bold. And let's create a hover effect using opacity. You're going to lower it down to 90. And when you hover over it, you're going to bring it up to 100 again. Let's use transition opacity for the, and let's use transition opacity. And this is how it looks now. Let me copy and paste this last piece of text over here. So right under this div, we're going to create the last element inside this main, which will be the navigation. Going to put some space between the elements that are going to be inside. So let's use space Y4, use a H3 and say menu. Let's make it bigger and use a gradient text effect again. Let's make it bold and make the text emerald 400. Right under this H3, going to have another div, flex direction column and gap 3. Inside, we're going to have 4 links for these 4 sections. The first one is going to navigate us to the about section. Let's set the width to 50%, give it a border, background black 30%, and give it a gray border with 40%. Flex, you're going to use the group class name to create a group hover effect. Going to center the items horizontally and put some space between the elements. There's going to be a text and a little arrow icon inside. Let's give it some padding. Padding 3. Cursor is going to be pointer when you hover over it. Let's give it a transition colors for the hover effect and set the duration to 200. Transition will be ease linear, and when you hover over it, you're gonna set the background to zinc 800 with 40% opacity and some little rounded corners. Inside the link, as I said, we're gonna have a span that says about, and right under it, we're gonna use one of these React icons that we have imported a few minutes ago. So bi chevron right. It is going to have some space on the right, so margin right 5. Gonna make it a lot bigger. To create the hover effect, you're gonna set its default position on the x-axis to 0, and when you group hover over this link element, you're gonna move it from 0 to 3. Let's make it gray 300. Set the opacity to 0, which will make it invisible. And when you group hover, you're gonna set the opacity to 100, which will make it visible. Transition all and duration 200 for the hover effect. And now for the other sections, we are just going to copy and paste this. The second one is going to be work. Let's change this text to work. Don't forget to change the link as well. Third one is going to be skills. And the final one is going to be contact. And here is the menu with the hover effect. When you hover over it, the background color changes, and we have this arrow coming from left, which is not visible at the beginning, and it becomes visible if you click on these links and take a look at this URL. We change the route to those pages, but we don't see anything because the pages are empty. Let's see if every single one of them works. And looks like everything is working fine. Just to prevent any problems in routing, let's make this C lowercase because the folder name is lowercase, and if you make this link navigate to a lowercase contact, it may cause some problems. So this is basically how the routing works. You create a link, and using the href, you put the folder's name inside the href, and you gotta have a page.tsx inside these folders. If you change the name of this file, the route is not going to work because Next.js is basically looking for a file named page.tsx, but the component name doesn't have to be page. You can change this to about or contact or anything else, but just make sure that the file name is page.tsx. So right under this div, still inside the main and the nav elements, I'm gonna create another div, flex gap 2, and center the items. I'm gonna have this h3 that says check out my socials. I'm gonna make it a lot bigger. Let's use the gradient text effect again. Set the font to bold. Make the text transparent. Set the background gradient to right from emerald 400 via sky 400 to blue 400. Right under this h3, gonna have a arrow down icon. Let's make it bigger and give it a color sky 400. Under this div, gonna have another one, flex direction column, and gap 3. For these social media links, we're gonna have 4 links, and we're gonna use buttons. So let's use the button. Background is going to be black 30%, width 100%, padding 6. Gonna set the text to gray 300, give it a border, and set the border to gray 700 with 40% opacity. When you hover over it, gonna make the background slate 320%, and we're gonna make the text white. Let's give it transition colors and duration 200 for the hover effect, and ease linear. Inside, let's put the GitHub logo. Let's say GitHub. Let's copy and paste this. Let's change this one to YouTube. Let's change this one to TikTok. And finally, Instagram. And with this done, we have completed this page. Let's see how it looks. And there you go. It looks beautiful. We have the glass effect. We have the background video moving. Hover effects are looking well. The gradient text effects are looking good, so we can move on to the other pages. So back inside our project, let's go into the About folder and its page.tsx file. At the top, let's import everything that we are going to use, such as the same button from chatcn, the link component from Next, and a arrow light and a arrow icon to the left. Let's delete this text and set this div to a minimum edge screen, make it a flex container, and center the items inside. Inside, just like the other page, we're gonna have a main, which will be set to maximum width x large, margin 3. After the medium breakpoint, margin is going to be 8, z index 50 with 100%, space y8, a border, rounded corners, and the border is going to be gray 700, 50% opacity, padding 5. After this small breakpoint, padding is going to be 10, and backdrop blur for the glass effect, and we're gonna set the background to black 80%. The first element that we're gonna have inside is a link, which will basically navigate us back to the home page, and we can define the home page by just putting a dash inside the href, and inside let's have a button from chatcn. Gonna set the variant to ghost. On hover, gonna make it black and text white, rounded corners, and the duration is going to be 300 for the hover effect. Inside there is going to be a text that says back and a arrow to the left. Let's put some gap on the left using margin left 2. Right under this link, gonna have a div with space y6, a h1 at the top that says about me. Gonna make it a lot bigger, text for x large. Gonna use the same gradient effect, font bold, text transparent, and a background gradient to right from emerald 400, sky 300 to blue 500. So we're gonna create a div for 2 paragraphs inside and put some space between them, space y4. Gonna make the text neutral 200, and let's use text pretty for responsiveness using tracking tight again. So inside these paragraphs, again, you can put your own information. I will be copy and pasting some texts, and under this div, gonna have another one with space y4 again. This time it is going to be for education. Let's copy and paste this h1, turn it into a h2, and make it smaller. Let's delete this sky color and change this to education. Create another div, space y2, and you can put your degree over here. Let's increase the font, and under this paragraph you can write down the college, and there is only one section left. You can copy and paste this one with space y4. This one is going to be for professional experience. Let's increase the gap and delete these paragraphs and create divs. This one is going to have a font of medium. And this one is going to have a text color of neutral 500. And that is it with this page. Of course, you can keep adding your professional experiences or college degrees in your liking. This is how it looks. Looks like this button is a bit too close to this header, and we can handle that. Let's see, we can go back and we can navigate back by clicking on that button. Let's click on About. And there you go. So let's scroll to the top and find the button. Let's use margin button 5 and cursor pointer. And this looks way better. Now that this page is done, we can move on to the next one, which is the work page. So inside the page.tsx file of the work folder, let's start with the imports, link from next link. Going to be using the image component from Next.js again. Going to use the same button from chat.cn. Going to use a logo, which will be GitHub, and another one, which is just going to be an external link icon. So CG external, a arrow left icon, and finally the most important one, which will be the project's data from the JSON file that I showed you earlier in the video, projects.json. Oops, we can delete this one. So inside the component, let's create an object for the projects and pass the project's data. Delete this text and set this background to minimum age screen. Make it a flex container and center the items. Inside, we're gonna have another main element. Gonna set the maximum width to this time 4x large, which will be a lot bigger than the others because we're gonna have 4 cards with images inside. Margin 3 for medium screens 8, Z index 50, width 100%, space Y 8, border and rounded corners. Gonna make the border gray 750%, padding 5, for smaller screens padding 10, and a glass effect for the background. Let's set the background to black 80%. Let's start by creating a div and set its position to relative, flex and justify center. We're gonna have the same go back button from the about page, so we can copy and paste this link from here, but this time the button will be positioned absolute with left 0. We can delete the margin button 5. Right under this link, we're gonna have a h1 that says my work. Let's make it a lot bigger. Text 5x large, font bold, and the same gradient effect from emerald 400 to sky 300. Height 14, margin top 14, and for screens that are bigger than small breakpoint, margin top is going to be 0. And oops, I have made a small error. Let's move this div inside the main. And this is how it looks. Let's continue right under this div. I'm gonna create another one, which will be a grid. For the smallest screen, there is going to be only one column. And for the screens that are larger than the medium, I'm gonna have 2 columns with a gap of 6. Inside this div, you're gonna map over this projects object. So projects.map, and for every single project, you're gonna create a div. We also need to pass a key. So let's pass the project ID as the key. Gonna create a group hover effect. So let's use group. Gonna hide the overflow because we're gonna put some images inside and we don't want the images to be overflowed. Gonna have some rounded corners, a border, and when you hover over this card, it is going to be a little bit bigger. Gonna have a neutral border, 800 with 70% opacity, background black 50%, and transition for the hover effect. Inside, we're gonna put the image at the top and information about the project at the bottom. So inside this div, let's use the image component from Next. So from that JSON file, we basically access this projects object and we can pass the project image. We also need to provide a alt text, which can be project title. We can use the fill attribute, and let's make this image cover all the available space using object cover, transition transform, and duration 300 for the hover effect. And when you group hover, the image is also going to be bigger. So right under this div, inside the other div, I'm gonna give it padding 6. Inside the h3, you're gonna have the project title. Right under it, inside the paragraph, you're gonna have the project description. Let's make it bigger. Font semi-bold and margin bottom 2. Text gray 300 and margin bottom 4. Inside, right under this, we're gonna use another div, flex wrap, and gap 2 with margin bottom 4. Inside this one, we are going to map over the text tag and we're going to display them. So let's access the tags and map over them. For every single tag, I'm going to pass their index as well. I'm going to create a span element with the key index. Inside, we're going to display the tag. Let's give it some padding on the x-axis and py1. Text is going to be smaller, rounded full. Background is going to be slate 850% and text gray 300. Let's give it a border. And border is going to be natural 870%. Also, let's style the parent element of this image as well. It is going to be positioned relatively, height 48, width full, and overflow hidden. Right under this div, let's have another div, which is going to be a flex container with gap 3. Inside, we're going to have two buttons that are going to be side by side. First one is going to be the outline, and the second one is going to be ghost. This is going to take one flex of space and the other one as well. So they are going to be taking equal space inside this div, 50% to 50%. Let's make the text white, background black. I'm going to create a blur effect on the background and a border neutral 800 to 70%. Transition colors for the hover effect. And we're going to use is linear. Inside, we're going to have a anchor tag that says code. And we're going to use GitHub logo on the top. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Height 4, width 4, and margin right 2. The second one is going to have a text of gray 300. Same backdrop blur effect. The border is going to be the same as well as the transition, so we can copy and paste this. Inside, gonna have a anchor tag, this icon, external, margin right, height 4 and width 4. And we're gonna say live demo. And inside the buttons, we can use the asChild attribute to pass these styles. And this is how it looks. We have 4 cards. We have the buttons for the GitHub code and a live demo. You can link your project demos into these buttons and the GitHub link. And now that this is done, we can go on to the next part, which is the skills section. Back inside our project, let's head into the skills page. Let's import the chat.cn button, import the link from Next.js. Let's import the arrow icon to left. And we also need to import the skills data from the JSON file. So data skills.json. Let's delete this text and set this div to minimum age screen. Flex container and center the items inside. Inside, we're going to have a main element, which is going to be the same main element as the others. So we can just copy and paste this to maintain the consistency. Inside, we're going to have the same link button that takes us back to the main page. So let's have that as well. Right under this, we're going to have a div with space Y6 and a H1 that says technical skills. Let's make it a lot bigger. Background clip text, font bold. Gonna use the same gradient effect. So background gradient to right from emerald 400, sky 300 to blue 500. Let's have another div, which we are going to use as a container. This time we will be mapping over the skills data and its categories, and for each category you're gonna have a div with the key category name. Let's use space Y4. We can have this H2 that displays the category name. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Another div which is going to be a grid with columns of 2 and gap 4. This time you're gonna map over these skills, and for each skill gonna create a div. Let's pass the key as the skill name. Let's give it a padding of 4, rounded corners, border gray 700, 50%, and background black 40%. Inside we're gonna display the skill name. Let's increase the font weight and margin bottom 2. Inside this div we're gonna display the skill level. Let's set it to width 100%, background gray 200, full rounded corners, height 2.5. Inside we're gonna have another div which is going to be an empty one. We are just going to style this in order to make it look like a progression line. So background emerald 400, height 2.5, rounded full, and using the style attribute I'm gonna set the width to the skill level. Now let's see how it looks. And there you go. This is how it looks. Now that this is done, we can move on to the final page, which is the contact page. Inside the contact page, at the top, let's import everything we need. Let's import the button, the link. Gonna have 2 icons from React Icons BI, BI Map Pin, and BI Phone. Gonna have a BS arrow left, and finally a mail icon. Let's delete this text. Make this cover the entire page. Make it a flex container and center the items. Inside you're gonna have the same main element, so let's just copy and paste it. The same link element from the other pages. Let's not forget to give it margin bottom 5 and cursor pointer. Under this link you're gonna have a div with space Y6 and a H1 that says get in touch. Let's make it a lot bigger. Background clip text, font bold. Let's create that same gradient effect. Emerald 400 to sky 300 to blue 500. Let's create another div with space Y6. Inside we're gonna have this paragraph with text pretty and neutral 300 and text neutral 200 with tracking tight. Inside you can write down whatever you like. I will copy and paste this text. Under this paragraph you're gonna have a div with space Y4. Let's create a flex container and center the items horizontally with gap 3, padding 4, and some rounded corners, a gray border, and the background with black 40%. This one is going to display your mail. So let's use the mail icon, width 5, height 5, and text emerald 400. Under this mail icon, you're gonna have a div with a h3 and a anchor tag under it. This one is going to have a font weight of medium. Let's make this text neutral 500, and on hover, gonna make it text emerald 400. Let's give it a transition for the hover effect. And now we can copy and paste this div 2 more times. This one is going to be for the phone. Let's change this to phone. Let's copy and paste this 1 more time. This one is going to be for the location. Let's delete this and write location. And change this anchor tag to a paragraph. Delete the href. So right under this div that has these 3 cards, I'm gonna create another one with space y4. It is going to have a h2 that says send me a message. And we're gonna have a form. Let's make it 2x large and font semi-bold. Let's create the form with space y4. Inside we're gonna have 3 divs with space y2. The first one is going to have a label of name, text small, and font medium. Right next to the label, we're going to have this input, which is going to be a text. ID is going to be name, and the placeholder is going to say your name with 100%, padding 2, rounded large. Let's make it a flex container and center the items. Horizontally, gap 3. Let's give it a border. Gray 700, 50%, and background black 40%. When you focus on this input, so when you click on it, you're gonna delete the outline, and we're gonna create this ring, 2 pixels, and it is going to be emerald 500. Let's give it a transition as well. Now let's copy this and paste it for the second one, which will be email. Change the placeholder to your email. Let's copy and paste it again. This time, this will be for message, and we're going to delete this input, and we're going to switch it with a text area. It is going to have 5 rows, and the placeholder is going to be your message with 100%, padding 2, rounded corners. We can copy and paste the style over here. It is exactly going to be the same under this div, but still inside the form. You're going to have a button with full, text black, and background is going to be emerald 400. When you hover over it, I'm going to make it 500. It will say send message, and it is basically done. Let's see how it looks. And there you go. We have the email, phone, location, and the form. Let's see if the responsiveness is working well. So this is the main page. Let's see the about page. And this is the work page. The skills page. And finally, the contact page. And with this, we have completed the website. So this is how we can create this beautiful portfolio website using Next.js and Tailwind. I hope you guys find it helpful and enjoyed it. Thank you for your time, and I will see you on the next video.